Okay, let's talk a little bit about consciousness. When we talk about consciousness, several things we're going to chat about. We're going to talk about attention, and we're going to talk about sleep, and possibly might get into a little bit on hypnosis. But first, of course, we're going to start with our Far Side cartoon, and let's move into attention. Talking about consciousness, let's first define what consciousness is. Right at the top, we've got our awareness of the sensations, thoughts, and feelings that we are focusing on at that moment. Now, it's, you see right below, consciousness is a fairly limited thing. The way I like to think about it, and the way others have described it too, is you can think about it like a spotlight. A consciousness is focused on a limited amount of information at any given moment. So, for example, let's say that you are looking out at a crowd of people. There are some people that you're focusing on at that moment, just a few people that you're paying attention to. You know, you're aware of a lot of people, maybe like hundreds of people that are there, and that all those images are hitting your retina. But you're only paying attention to a few people, and those people are the ones that you're consciously aware of that are getting your, like I said, getting your attention. And so, for that reason, we sort of think, it's a good analogy to think of consciousness as a spotlight, sort of a limited amount of information at any moment. Okay, now, if we now get a little bit more specific with regard to attention, we'll talk a little bit about selective attention and something called the cocktail party effect, right? Which is the ability to attend selectively to a given individual speech in the midst of competing conversations. So think of a big, party, or at a restaurant, let's say, or a bar. Let's say a restaurant, a really lively restaurant. You're at a big table, got lots of people, all your friends or maybe relatives sitting around the table, and everybody's got some kind of crosstalk, some sitting, maybe talking to someone who's 2 seats over or across the table from you. And this cocktail party effect just basically says that we can sort of not pay attention to, we're able to not pay attention to all these other related, speech conversations going on right there, right next to us, and only then pay attention to that one person who we want to pay attention to. So it's our ability to sort of tune everything else out. Very handy and very adaptive. Now, so that was selective attention. Now we want to talk a little bit about divided attention. Divided attention is where you can, as this definition has listed, you can divide up your attention and simultaneously engage in 2 or more activities. For example, talking to a friend in your car while you're driving the car, right? Or if you want to get even more basic, walking and chewing gum at the same time. Maybe some people can't do that, but it's your ability to divide your attention among those activities. Now, I like to do this little test called the Stroop test to illustrate a point that we're about to talk about with regard to divided attention. Sometimes certain tasks are overlearned, and those, what I mean by overlearned is that we've done those. There's a sort of default tasks that we kind of automatically do. And sometimes that might interfere with our ability to simultaneously do another task, which may be novel or unusual or new, right? So an example of this is a nice example with the Stroop test. Okay, so here's what you do. Here's what we do. With the Stroop test, I'm first going to ask you to just, and you don't have to do this, we can if you want, but as fast as possible, maybe let's just say right now, read from the top to the bottom. You can say it out loud as fast as possible, the words that you are seeing, right? And you go red, yellow, blue, green, green, yellow, blue, right? Boom. Really fast, right? Now for the next slide, what I want you to do is tell me, and do the same thing, but now instead tell me the color of the ink that the word is written in. Right? So the color of the letters that the word is written in. Right? Okay. And you see that if you're trying to do this really fast, it's probably not working out very well for you. And the reason is because of what I was mentioning earlier. When we're reading something, we process it automatically in terms of its semantic meaning. That is, what the thing means, right? So when you're looking at a word, like let's say, oh, yellow, like the third from the top left, yellow, right? So you're thinking, so you perceive yellow, right? Because you're reading the word yellow, but you're supposed to be saying red, right? Because that's written in red. But if the first automatic thing that pops in your head is yellow, that's interfering with your ability to say, no, I have to remember that it's the color of the ink, and it's red, right? So you see yellow is interfering with that, right? Same thing with orange right below it. You don't want to say orange, you want to say green, and so on and so on. So again, that illustrates what that there are certain overlearned or automatic activities or perceptions that can interfere with our ability to have this just distributed, right, divided attention for us. Okay. Now let's talk a little bit about consciousness a little further in terms of a couple of concepts we're going to mention. First, we got mere exposure. Now, with mere exposure, this is research by a guy named Zions. What Zions did was he said that what he wanted to do is he gave people a little packet of pictures. And they were Chinese ideographs, just like Chinese symbols. And the reason he chose those is because he wanted to pick something that people, in this case, these were, I think, students at University of Michigan, hadn't had very much experience with those. They hadn't been exposed to it. So they wouldn't have positive attitudes toward it or negative attitudes. They were sort of ambivalent, right? And that's what he wanted. So he wanted to have someone, all these kids had neutral attitudes toward these symbols. And so their job was just open up this packet, look on each page would be one symbol. Look at it for a few seconds, turn the page, different symbol, turn the page, symbol, and so on. And unbeknownst to them, or maybe they did start to notice, some symbols only showed up once in the packet. Some others, though, were repeated. Maybe they showed up twice, or 3 times, or 4 times, or 5 times. And then they set the packet down. Then he gives them a separate packet. This is a questionnaire. And at the top is a picture of a symbol, one of the symbols. And then right below it says, rank your attitude toward this symbol. Like, do you really like it? On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being like you really love it, or 1 being, you really hate it, you really don't like it. And circle a corresponding number that corresponds to what you think about that particular symbol. And so they go through and they answer the questions, for every symbol that showed up in the packet. And what he found was the more times a symbol was presented to the person, the more positive their attitude was toward the symbol. And he calls this mere exposure, right? The more you're exposed to, just simply being exposed to it, makes you it causes you to feel more comfortable with it, have a more positive attitude toward it. And the caveat to this, though, is that the initial exposure has to either be cause you to feel either neutral or slightly positive toward it. If your initial exposure is negative, then seeing it several more times isn't going to help things. It's going to make it actually more negative. Like, for example, you hear like say a radio commercial, and they have some kind of maybe an annoying jingle, some kind of song. Hearing it a lot more is not going to help you. It's not going to make you like that commercial anymore, right? But again, it seems to be the case that if it's your initial impression is neutral or slightly positive, then hearing it, being exposed to it several more times, will cause you to have a more positive attitude toward it. That's what he means by mere exposure. Now, I wanted to mention the Greenwald. I'm not sure if I want to talk about the Greenwald study or not. Yeah, we'll go ahead. And just basically what I wanted to talk about the Greenwald study is something that sort of captured the attention and the sort of the imagination of people in the U.S. back in the 50s, and still to this day persists. And it's this idea of subliminal perception. That is, can you perceive things below the level of consciousness? Can your brain perceive things below the level of consciousness? Subliminal words or pictures, or right? So you're not consciously aware that you're seeing it or hearing it. Maybe you're hearing a message, and you're hearing, let's say, you've got these tapes out there, for example, self-help tapes that you hear ocean sounds or nature sounds. And then below the level of consciousness, though, apparently there will be a second track of messages designed to help you not smoke anymore or lose weight, or right. So it sounds really kind of cool. You buy this CD, put it in your player, and you're just sort of relaxing to these gentle sounds of nature, and you don't have to do anything really, right? Maybe you're reading a book or whatever. Maybe you're sleeping. Maybe it's supposed to work when you're sleeping. And then what's supposed to be happening is your brain is processing these messages below the level of awareness, and it's supposed to help you, right, improve your life somehow. So that's how it's persisting in today's culture. Back in the 50s, this guy started the whole thing off with he was the owner of a drive-in movie place, and he said that he inserted messages onto a screen that flashed up for just a fraction of a second, like buy hot dogs now, or buy snacks now, or drink more Coca-Cola, or whatever. And he said he increased his concession stand sales by like 25 to 30% just by having these super brief, you can't even really perceive them, things flashing on the screen. And this is 1950s, this time of great paranoia. You have the McCarthy hearings, the Red Menace, communism scare. And so people were really afraid of what this guy was saying, because it sounds like that he was controlling their minds and they had no control over what they were doing. And sort of big brother-ish and so on. So again, this idea of subliminal persuasion was entered into our pop culture. And it turned out a year later, actually, the guy revealed that it was just a big joke. He didn't do any of this stuff. Didn't flash messages on, didn't increase his concession stand, but it was too late. By then, there'd been hundreds of articles written about it, news stories. It got into American consciousness that this is a thing, and still is present today. So what Greenwald wanted to do was to try to basically find out, hey, do these things even work? These self-help CDs, And so what he did was he bought some, one for memory and one for self-esteem. Had people come to the lab, and they took a memory and self-esteem test first. then they were given one of the tapes, or sorry, I should say the CDs, and they were told to listen to it every night for, say, like a month, and then come back. And they came back and they listened to the CD. Or sorry, they took when they came back to the lab, they retook the memory test and the self-esteem test. And research shows that no matter what CD they were listening to, if it was a memory one or if it was a self-help one, and in fact, he had another condition where he switched the labels on the thing, on the actual disc, so that people thought they were hearing a self-esteem enhancement, messages below the level of awareness, but in fact it was one of the memory enhancement ones, which is why he had them, everybody take both tests. Okay. Now, what the results showed was that there was no improvement at all in anyone in any condition from time 1 to time 2. What he has found, and so what he's saying in light of this experiment and a number of other experiments that he's done related to this issue, is he found that the brain can't process these long subliminal messages, that are hours long. What it can do, because that's too complex, it can and does process information that's below level awareness in terms of a word or a picture, right? Something very simple and very short. Then the brain can perceive that stuff at the level that our conscious awareness can't detect. So some fascinating research on that. It's covered a lot more in detail, I was going to say, in cognitive psychology if you take that class. But let's move on to talking a little bit about sleep, right? In terms of consciousness, we'll talk about a different type of altered state of consciousness, right? In terms of sleep, let's first talk about circadian rhythms, right? The way that your body regulates its physiological arousal is something called circadian rhythm, right? It's talking about it's your normal pattern of physiological arousal in a given 24-hour period. Actually, it's interesting. They've done research where they want to find out how does the body naturally regulate itself? Is it a 24-hour clock, or is it on some other time frame? Like if you had no knowledge of the passage of time in terms of clock or the sunrise or any of that, what would your circadian rhythm be? And it actually turns out to be pretty close. It's 25 hours. And so close to our regular 24 hours day schedule. So it's 25 hours. That's the natural circadian rhythm. Now, I want to just show you in terms of sleep stages what they look like. And you won't need to know these. And I know it's a little blurry here, but and like I said, I'm not going to ask you to know any of these EEG readouts. The EEG is just an electroencephalogram. It's a readout of the electrical activity of your brain. So in the wake stage, you can see that readout looks very sort of small. Sleep stage 1, so stage 1 of your sleep, you can see that you get a little bit more. It slows down in its frequency, right? The waves, the little peaks and valleys. And you get random little spikes that are starting to show up. Stage 2, even more. They're called spindles. That, like right in the middle on sleep 2, that rather huge jump, that's the sleep spindle. And then stage 3, you're getting even more deeper into sleep, right? And you can see how it slows down in frequency, and you get a lot more of these bigger peaks and valleys. And then stage 4, which is probably the deepest type of sleep, you get this really, this particular pattern, right? It's basically all huge peaks and valleys. Now, interestingly, stage 5 is otherwise called REM, rapid eye movement. And there's a lot of interesting stuff that happens in REM, which we'll chat about in a second. I want to actually go back to this. Now you see this stage kind of resembles a little bit, it's almost like a combination of, it's probably pretty close to stage 1, which is kind of strange, right? We call REM paradoxical sleep because your brain is really active, but your body is paralyzed, interestingly, for the most part. You can't really move in REM stage. REM stage is that's when we dream, right? So not anywhere else. So, and when we dream, if you want to know if someone's dreaming, actually, a simple way to do is just to sort of look at their, their eyes, their eyelids. And if you see their eyes darting around, moving around under their eyelids, that means they're in rapid eye movement. They're in REM stage sleep. That's one way. Lots of interesting things happen while you're in REM sleep. For example, your heart rate increases, blood pressure increases, galvanic skin response changes, blood flows to the genitals for some strange reason, not sure why. Again, this is where you're dreaming. Now, let's take a look at this next slide right here. This talking about the cycles of sleep. I want to talk about that for a second. A sleep cycle is about 90 minutes. That's a cycle where you go through all the stages, and then you come back, and then you end in REM. And then when you're done, that's a complete cycle. If you're looking at the bottom of this, you see those little black dots. Those are sleep position shifts. That's just an example to show you. Not everybody does these, right? I mean, this is just a sample for a given individual. Some people may have less of these, and some may have a lot of them. Like it's all black dots all the way along the bottom. You're moving around all the time, and it's true. Your body moves around quite a bit when you're sleeping for most people. Okay, but now let's go back to this far left. If you look on the initial, so the very first sleep cycle, you're dropping down from awake to, you go very quickly into stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. You're dropping like a rock, right? Really, you're spending little time in each phase before you drop into the next. And then they spend some time, this particular individual spends some time in stage 4, and then they quickly come up to REM. Remember we said that REM stage looks a lot like the, look on the very bottom and then compare that to stage 1. The readouts almost look, they're very similar, which is why maybe this has arranged that way. Now look at REM, that first REM right on this right here on the far left, right? You're in REM for just a little bit of time, and then all of a sudden we're dropping down into 1, 2, 3, 4, right? And then back up all the way into REM. And look, now this second REM phase that you're in, you're spending more time in REM. And that's a point that I want to make right now, that as you go throughout the night, each time you get in REM, you're spending more time in REM. Okay, and another point I want to make about this slide is that you'll notice that after the second sleep cycle, they only drop down to stage 3. They don't go down to 4. Right? They stop at stage 3, and then they jump back up to 2 and then REM. 2, 1 REM. And then now look, after the third cycle, they only drop down to stage 2. And then you're in stage 2 for a while, and then jump all the way back up into stage 1 / REM, right? You're in REM. You'll see how it is. So you're not needing to go into the full cycles as the night goes on, and it's a lot faster, right? It's mostly just stage 2 or 1, and REM. Another thing that happens in REM is that your dreams incorporate external stimuli into the dream. So, we've all had that happen too, probably. Say you're late, you fell asleep on the couch, and you're dreaming that there's a phone, and why won't anyone answer the phone in your dream? Some phone's ringing. Oh my God. And you're running maybe in your dream to get to a phone, and you don't know where it is, and it keeps ringing and ringing. And then you wake up, let's say, and you hear the phone really ringing in your house. You go answer. Oh, I had this crazy dream that there's a phone ringing and nobody was answering it, and you get the idea. And again, we do this all the time. For example, when people are in an experiment in a sleep lab, researchers see that the person is dreaming, right? Their eyes are darting around. And they may do something like spray the person's face with a mist bottle, right? A little spray mist. And then immediately, sort of shake them and wake them up and say, hey, we noticed you were dreaming. What were you dreaming about? Oh, it was I was on a boat and there was a terrible storm and we were being, thrown about by the waves and there's this water everywhere, right? So, again, our dreams incorporate external stimuli into the dream. Okay. Now, one other thing I want to mention about REM before we move on. It's an interesting idea. Some people say that the reason why we're in, and we'll talk about this in a little bit more detail later, why we spend so much time, increasing amounts of time, and why REM is important. Because let's say when you're a baby, you spend a lot of time, your sleep is almost all REM. It's like a lot of time in REM stage. The most, right? And some people believe that is because REM and dreaming and so on is a way for the brain to make new connections, create new connections, and basically grow and learn, and so that's the sort of an adaptive way function of REM. Is it helps your brain literally grow and get thicker and form new synaptic pathways. Okay. Let's see. I think that's all we want to mention so far about REM. Let's move on to talk about why we sleep and how much sleep do we need. Okay. Different theories about why we sleep, and we'll talk about that in a second, but how much sleep do we need? You can tell if you are sleep deprived very simply. All you have to do is there's a couple ways to test this. If you lay your head down on the pillow right now, right, or on your couch or something, and if you immediately drop into sleep, we could say you're sleep deprived. And also, anyone who has their sleep cut short artificially, like in the morning, ideally, what we're talking about here is, an alarm clock. So you're sleeping, and then some external stimuli wakes you up. Your body wasn't yet ready to wake up. Then by definition, we know that you're sleep deprived. How much sleep do you need? It's different for different people. And it's important to remember that not everybody fits the same cookie cutter, 8 to 9 hours of sleep every night. You'll hear that. And there's a lot of research on sleeping, much more in the last 10 years than ever before, for a lot of reasons. People have sleep apnea associated with the obesity epidemic and so on. But and there's some evidence that less sleep is related to earlier onset of dementia and Alzheimer's and so on. And so there's a lot of reasons, a lot of benefits for getting enough sleep. Way to figure out how much sleep you need, so you, right, is to just go to sleep when you're tired. Just do this for like a week. You need a good like week to get all the data. Go to sleep when you're tired, write down what time it was. Then wake up naturally and don't have any other person or stimulus wake you up. Wake up naturally and then do that for about 5 to 7 days. Then average out the responses, and you'll have a fairly good approximation of what your body requires for sleep. Okay, it could be 10 hours, it could be 11, could be 6 or 5 or 4. It's different. Now, why do we sleep? We'll go back to that question. A lot of people have thought that at one time, thought it was a way to keep our bodies out of the way of predators. Back in the caveman days and so on, we'd sleep, hide, sort of downtime to keep ourselves away and safely out of the way of predators. That's probably not the favored explanation for sleep. Most researchers have adhered to sort of a physiological restorative function for sleep. Why do we sleep? We sleep because sleeping restores health to our body, right? To our brains. It gives our brains a chance to relax. It gives our body a chance to relax and recuperate from the stress that was under from the previous day. Another little factoid, just to throw this out there for you. You can amaze and delight your friends at the next party. That when we're sleeping, we actually grow about 1/4 of an inch. Maybe even, for some people, maybe even slightly more, maybe up to 1/2 an inch. But it's usually, for most people, it's around 1/4 inch. And the simple reason for that is that when you're laying down, your body, the sort of cartilage between all your joints and your spine and so on, expands. It sort of relaxes, because when you stand up, all your weight of your body is smashing down these little sponge-like material, right? Smashing onto it. So when you're laying down, though, it's like someone's sort of pulling those apart, right? And that's why you literally grow. So if you're just at that point, where you must be this tall to ride this ride, what you want to do is wake up and immediately rush, yourself to, and maybe in a laying down position, in the back seat somewhere, to the amusement park and quickly run over there. And maybe you just might make it. Now, dreaming. Let's talk a little bit about dreaming. What do we dream? Contrary to the stereotypes about dreaming, we tend to dream about kind of boring things. There's no, like Freud says that people are always thinking about sex. That's not really true. Well, for men, it's a little more true than women. 1 out of 10 dreams for men is sexual content. For women, it's about 1 out of 30 dreams have some sexual content. Now, so what do we dream? We tend to dream, like I said, about boring stuff. Things that happen during the day, taking tests, getting gas, meeting friends, studying, nothing too amazingly shocking. Okay, why do we dream? Freud says that dreams are the royal road to the unconscious, right? He wants to understand what's going on in your unconscious, right? And because if you can understand what's in the unconscious, you can then help the person because there's all this pent up energy and wishes and uncomfortable thoughts and that need to be released, because those things will give rise to other problems like, oh, you can have depression and relationship issues and so on, neuroses. Right, so he says that dreams are a great way to understand what's going on in the unconscious, and that's why he focused on those. He said his most important book, his proudest achievement, was a book he wrote, I think, in 1905 called The Interpretation of Dreams. And that he said, for example, that there's a dream has a manifest content and a latent content. The manifest content of a dream is the thing that you can remember about the dream. Like, oh, I dreamt that I was jello wrestling with my second grade teacher last night. What does that mean, right? That would be the manifest, the stuff that you can remember from the dream. Now, the hidden meaning, the underlying meaning of the dream, is the latent content. So your therapist, for example, might say to you, seems like you're dreaming about an authority figure, right? And authority figures are usually pertaining to mom or father. And so, or in this case, it was a teacher, right? So, let's say that this, instead of a teacher, a female teacher, it was your mother. We're going to say that she represented your mother, and you dreamt that you wish you had a better relationship with her or something like that. Whatever the interpretation is that the Freudian therapist would come up with, right? But again, he's saying that dreams are a great way to understand what's going on in the unconscious. So he said it's really important to understand dreams. It's important to understand the latent content and the manifest content of a dream. And from that, you can make an educated guess about what's going on in the unconscious and then start to treat the person. Now, other people have had different views on why we're dreaming. Like there's the information processing approach, which says that we keep dreaming because we want to try to solve the day's problems. We're not quite done yet. Interpersonal problems or financial or whatever it is. So your brain keeps kind of trying to work it out. And then there's a physiological function. I think we talked a little bit about this, but specifically the idea is that when you sleep, right, a lot of your actual physiological functioning is paralyzed when you're dreaming. And this is saying that why do we dream? The physiological function, if it's the case that your body's paralyzed and your brain, if your brain just sort of shut down, went into some kind of low energy mode, that probably wouldn't be very helpful and it would be kind of dangerous. So dreaming performs a physiological function. It's the use it or lose it kind of philosophy. Keeps our brain, dreaming helps keeps our brain active and not atrophy, I guess, right? To use another phrase. And then the last approach or theory about why we dream is actually the most popular in the modern sleep researchers. And you can think of it as the term implies, random neural firing, it's based on some work in cognitive psychology called the spreading activation network model. Spreading activation network. What this theory says, right, random neural firing, is that you've got a bunch of neural pathways that have been used throughout the day, and a lot of them originate in the sort of central part of the brain, and then when they fire off, they're seeking expression. They kind of go from the middle part of the brain toward the outer part of the brain. That's where the higher association areas are, responsible for things like reason and logic and so on, and associative learning and stuff. So you've got, like, again, start from the middle of the brain. You've got this electrical signal starting in the what's called the limbic system, right? In the middle part of the brain, very primitive area of research. Primitive area for the brain. And in there, for example, is things like some parts associated with the memory, and also like the amygdala, associated with fear and anger. So these throughout the night, you get these random neural signals fire outward toward the cerebral cortex, and the cerebral cortex does what it has to do, what it normally does. It takes these random neural activations, right? These random memories that are activated. Second grade teacher, you as an adult, which probably you haven't seen your second grade teacher since second grade. You as an adult, and apparently you guys know each other, and your second grade teacher has an age a day, and all that. And let's say, and then throw in mud wrestling, right? Bunch of random stuff that has never happened in real life. Also, throw in a person who from your past that does not know, or your present that does not know your second grade teacher, but in the dream they're great friends. What that's illustrating again is these random memories are activated in the cerebral cortex, and your cerebral cortex then tries to make sense of it by telling a story, right? The dream. So the random neural firing view says that dreams are a byproduct of random neural firing originating from the center of the brain and going externally to the higher memory associative areas in the cerebral cortex. Now, I want to mention one other thing, and that is that, and I mentioned this earlier, that the random neural firing approach is the one that's most popular today by current researchers. Now, it's not to say it's the only one or the definitive one. It's just the one that has the most parsimonious, approach. People tend to not like it as much as the Freudian approach, because the Freudian approach is kind of fun and interesting. People don't like to think that their dreams don't really mean anything, which is what the random neural firing says. Dreams don't mean anything; they're just a byproduct, right, of these random neural firings. Whereas Freud's view might say that dreams mean things, and some people like to think that dreams are a way for our ancestors to contact us or send us messages, and of course, there's no scientific evidence for that. Okay. I think that we will stop right here. I know in the beginning we mentioned that we're going to possibly talk about hypnosis, but I think we're going to stop, and maybe we're not going to cover that for now. And so this will be the end of our discussion on consciousness. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time.